What's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome back to the Pitlane podcast, episode number 45 today with the usual host, myself, Callum, and Tom. And this one, finally, is for an off-race weekend podcast, so just plenty of F1 news to talk about. Obviously, definitely a lot of headlines coming out post-Bahrain, a lot of kind of aftermath from Bahrain to talk about as well. I think we're going to kick off, really, with, because there was also the testing, Mclaren, which was a bit of an odd one in testing, and there was a bit of fallout also from the Grand Prix, some interesting, juicy stuff. So, Callum, do you want to kind of get us into that, I guess?
Well, let's do the big news, which I think everyone's kind of sick of hearing about now, is the fact that Fernando Alonso skipping the Monaco Grand Prix, and we're seeing Jenson back in the car because Alonso's going off to America to drive left and turn left quite a bit for like hours on end. So that was the big news that was coming out of that weekend. And if I'm honest, this is probably the first time I'm going to watch the Indy 500 because I'm actually genuinely interested to see how well he's going to do.
Yeah, same here. Yeah,
completely agree. Yeah, it's going to be a first time for a lot of people, and that is exactly why McLaren have done this, because it gives eyes to both sports, and it's a good thing for everybody. So,
and the thing that I was always being pointed towards on Twitter was the fact that there's like so many advantages just everywhere. Because for Alonso, there's this whole huge rumour, or it's basically true, that Alonso's trying to be kept happy at McLaren so he can stay there. But then again, there's also like advantages like allowing F1 fans to go look at what Indy 500 and IndyCar is all about. But the main thing that I think Jake Humphrey was having a bit of a fit about on Twitter was the fact that there was no advantage for Formula One, which I thought was a bit stupid, because surely Indy fans would go, "Oh, who's this Fernando Alonso? Let's check him out. Where does he come from?" Ignore my accent, if any Americans. But you know what I mean? I can't see there's advantages everywhere.
I think it's also back to the Hulkenberg thing when Hulkenberg went to Le Mans. I think Vettel said it quite nicely in the press conference. You know, if Hulkenberg won it, and it made F1 drivers look better by winning Le Mans on his first attempt. If Alonso does well, it just makes F1 drivers look better, because it's like, they can go to a completely different class of driving, where it's been brought up a lot of times where it's like, Alonso is a great driver, but Indy's very, very different. So yes, he's a great driver, but the experience isn't there. So if he goes there without literally zero experience, simulator work, it'll be beforehand, and he does well, it just heightens the kind of stature of like these drivers, as in a global sense, really, not just in the F1 bubble. So I think it's a win there for F1. And, get a bit of a good feel of, having Button back in the McLaren. I think a lot of people are going to be happy about that, just seeing him back in the paddock, I guess, for one race. I don't think it was much of a shock to most of us. I mean, it was kind of the obvious choice, because contractually he's still a McLaren driver, really. So, I think there was like some reports who kind of put it in the headline, was it persuaded Button it didn't take much persuading to come back. It's like, I don't think much persuading is needed when it's contractually obliged to, like, you're a driver, come drive for us. There's no kind of like
Formula One at the end of the day. And what a track to debut a car. Monaco. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw him in a wall that weekend, because
in practice,
they are quite new cars, but no, it's just great all round. It's just great for the sport, because everyone loves Jenson Button, so it's nice to see him back into the sport. And the only big problem, and everyone kept saying it was a bit of a kick in the teeth for McLaren, is the fact that probably the most capable driver out of them three is Alonso to get him points. And what better track to get a solid chunk of points other than Monaco?
But also on the flip side, I think Zach Brown said it quite interesting. Like, they're not there to finish like 6th or 7th. I genuinely don't think McLaren care about their points at all. I think they've got the funding, they've got the money. It's not like they're Sauber fighting for points for survival. I genuinely think they're just there to every single race to continue trying to improve and trying to get as close as they can to back to where they want to be. And I think Zach Brown, the way he confidently said that in his interview, I think with Sky, I think Simon Lazenby, I can't remember who it was like grilling him. And the confidence he said that in, like, we're not there to finish 6th. I don't think it really matters too much if Alonso's not there. And as Tom mentioned, it's great all round, from every standpoint, a PR standpoint. So Zach's happy with that. So, I think all round, I think the people who are angry with it or kind of kicking up a fuss or just kicking it up just for the fact that maybe they're a little bit jealous. You know, we saw Hamilton say he would love to do other races, maybe. You know,
MotoGP, I think he bought.
Yeah, I think that was
quite an odd one.
Yeah, it's quite an odd one. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much all that needs to be said. That was sort of, kind of middle of the weekend, beginning of the weekend that came out. But sticking with McLaren then, after the race, obviously we know how Fernando did in that race, had to eventually retire. Van Dorn didn't even start. We mentioned that last podcast. But afterwards... Retire, yeah. I'll let you speak on that, Callum, since you're starting with it. But there was a very interesting development with Alonso that Ted and a few others were speculating to.
Yeah, and it's quite a weird one in a sense because basically there's been a rumor that Alonso, if he isn't in the points, which is quite contradictory to what Zach Brown's been saying, we're not here to finish in the low points. If Fernando Alonso isn't in the points, he will retire the car on the final lap of the Grand Prix, it does ring some bells because Alonso was the one that declared the retirement in Bahrain on the final lap of the Grand Prix, and the team didn't mention anything, and I don't think anything has come out of McLaren saying what the problem was. So what has been speculated is Alonso, just to give McLaren and himself a bit more fun, turns the engine up, uses all the fuel, and then goes, "Oh, lads, I'm out of fuel. I'm going to have to retire on the last lap." And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest, because if he retires, he's just putting Honda in a bad name.
I think it's just pressure. I think that's how Ted put it. Like, he wants to put pressure on Honda to continue pushing on. So if they finish a Grand Prix, it's like, oh, we made progress. If he continues to retire, it's like, oh, God, we're still in shit. We need to improve. And... I don't know. I sort of feel like classic Alonso almost when you hear that. It's like, yeah, he would be the kind of guy to just cheekily do that just to put even more pressure on.
Yeah, well, it did seem that way because when he was battling with Palmer and Kvyat, towards the end for like P11, when he sort of lost that battle, you can see he just sort of vanished and then eventually retired for no reason. So that's a very Alonso thing to do. I completely get his frustration. There's not much to say. I just I am concerned on the budget front for McLaren. I know, Aarav, you're saying you're not, but I understand. I think Honda pay them to use engines from McLaren Honda. But they're not a manufacturer. I know they've had many years of success, but I wonder how many years they can allow themselves of this because the sponsor front is running thin and they still want a title sponsor for next year after the season that they're having. So,
it's interesting, isn't it? But then you look at McLaren and you think, oh, how much money are they making from the road car side of things?
Yeah,
you just look at the beauty of a McLaren P1. What a car! And there always also been things thrown around that McLaren can make their own hybrid engine for the P1. Why can't they do that for their own Formula One car? But it's overall, it's very interesting in Team McLaren. I think you also actually just thinking about Alonso's retirement, nothing really made sense about it because didn't he turn his engine down or he slowed down going into turn 4? And normally, if you retire and to save the engine, normally they just go, pull up anywhere, just save the extra mile. At first, he went round back to the pits because he couldn't be asked to walk back.
When he did that, I thought he was just really making sure he let Hamilton through at that point because Hamilton was coming through on the blue flags. But then he just continued to go slow. Then it was I think at that point he sort of realised maybe his fight was over to try and even get 11th at best. So then he kicked in with the whole, engine's gone. Because then through, what was it? I think into the entry of Sector 3 up the hill, that was when he the radio came on and he just kind of trundled around and came all the way back to the pit. So, weird one. But after that, going into the testing, the first in-season testing, McLaren again, started off saying Honda were saying we're trying different things, we're just trying different ideas, which wasn't the ideal thing. You'd like to think they already had concrete ideas they were going to implement, but they were saying they were going to trial ideas during the sessions. Had poor reliability. Van Dorn couldn't run, and then what was it on the last day of testing? It
was Turvey. It was 2 days. Turvey the first day, and Van Dorn the second, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So
luckily, their main driver got most of the laps.
Van Dorn on their final attempt, on their final running, got 81 laps. Was it?
Yeah, 81.
Yeah, there's a certain irony there, though, isn't there? If you look at it, I kind of feel sorry for him that he's turned the most amount of laps in testing. He has these piss poor weekends.
He did
and then he has
2 Bahrain Grand Prix in testing. So,
and the baffling thing about that is They didn't do anything different to the car.
Yeah, McLaren don't know why.
So
Van Dorn said that McLaren need to really understand what they did to that car, because they're scratching their heads.
The baffling thing there is they do know what they've done to it. They've done the same thing they had done to it all season. They did nothing different, but it still did 81 laps. So I believe that they call it luck. So that's probably what it was. I don't think you're gonna find that on the gearbox of the car or something. So McLaren are a very mixed team at the minute. I'm to be honest, I'm just looking forward to seeing Button come back. That's about it, really. Around Monaco, maybe get a point or two. That's about it. They need major miracles. They said the new engine was like 2-3 podcasts ago. The engine was due in like 2 months' time. So would it be there for Monaco? Maybe.
Well, what they did say is, because everyone was saying, hold on, if Button is going to be driving in Monaco, why hasn't he been flown out to Bahrain to get a few laps under his belt? And McLaren said that the car will be too different compared to Bahrain to Monaco. So these ideas, they seem to be quite confident in the ideas, although they didn't really. The way they said they had ideas wasn't very giving us much confidence. But
they're digging a nice grave for later on if they need to line it. So that's what they're doing in a minute. So
McLaren are a weird one. But
one sort of final point, McLaren. I did hear this kind of weird thing at the very beginning of Bahrain Grand Prix, actually, about Mercedes potentially giving Honda a little bit of homework help on some of the parts of the engine, like just giving them, not parts like physical parts, just giving them knowledge on
here
some
we have
of the things.
The blueprints from 2014.
Just as a sort of like the way it was said was like almost just a kind of camaraderie of kind of like, okay, come on, you're so far behind. You're not a competitor to us. Even if we do help you a little bit, you're still not going to be fighting us. So let's give you a little boost just to kind of help the sport and sportsmanship.
Help your little brother out a little bit.
Yeah.
Come on, you can't let him struggle.
Come on, Timmy, come on.
Come on, up the field you go. But I think that concludes McLaren, because otherwise we're just going to be repeating ourselves most of the time. And we can probably talk about the team that are closest to them on the grid is Sauber. And we did briefly mention this last podcast after the Bahrain Grand Prix, but we wanted to talk a little bit about Verline and the kind of the uncovering of really what happened with his injuries. Because I think 2 weeks ago, Verline did state that the media don't know actually how severe his injuries were. And Sauber didn't really say anything, and Verline didn't really say anything. And we've only just found out now that they were very, very severe, and it was a good... I don't know how the hell he managed to do laps in testing, but I don't know, what do you two think about this whole uncovering just now as well? It wasn't even
laps in testing, it was laps in Australia free practice as well.
And that,
remember, Giovinazzi came in on Saturday, so I've always said there was something else going on behind the scenes, because it wasn't really clear, and there was rumours floating around whether Pascal really wants it, whether he wants to drive for Sauber or not, and finally there was some pictures revealed where he's wearing like a pretty hefty neck brace, which covered his entire torso, and it was very well stabilised, so apparently, because in the ROC crash, he wasn't wearing a hands device. That made it much worse than what it should have been. Right. And obviously, he was feeling the effects. And he still said he says he felt pain when he got in and out of the car at Bahrain, but he put on a fantastic performance the whole weekend. And
well done to him, to be honest, because
you can't forget that he is a very promising driver in terms of potential.
Yeah, and he's still under the wing of Mercedes. He's still very much a part of the whole Mercedes family, but it was very surprising, because obviously we spoke about the fact that maybe Ferrari are paying Giovinazzi, and it really just goes to show how much the media blow it out of proportion, when in just actual fact he just had a bad injury and he had to just sit out the car in the same way that Alonso was just forced to sit out. I think obviously the injuries were slightly different, but at the end of the day, if a driver doesn't feel up to it, then he's not feeling up to it. He's not feeling up to it just because he doesn't want to drive. I don't think any driver would just go, I can't be asked to drive this weekend. Throw that Italian bloke in and see how he does. But I don't know. I think that's probably it for that little topic. just quite a confusing one, to be honest. But
yeah,
what
I
else?
just wish they just come out from the start. It reminds me of the Van der Garde, like the 3-driver contract situation. Like, can't Sauber just say from the start, listen, this is what's going on. He'll be back for this time. That's it. It's like the exact same thing's going on. It's been like a big kerfuffle in the media, and like everything's just
I think it's more the
cycle
media
jerks and just
rather than Sauber. I think Sauber were as clear as they could have been in that stage, because you can't. There's issues coming out and really explaining how bad the injury is when you're pre-season, because then you might get some sponsors being like, your main driver, might want to pull out if your main driver's not looking for it, like if it's a complete sideline injury. So there's a lot of sticky stuff with the PR stuff about showing truly how bad injuries are, especially when it comes to F1, because obviously it's different to other sports where the sponsors aren't so attached sometimes to like the drivers or like the car real time. Like if a footballer gets injured, sponsors are for the team, not the actual player. Yeah. So I think Sauber did the best they could. I think, like Cal said, I think it was more media kind of just going, oh, what's going on here? What's going on? So I mean, it's past now. Verline's back. He's going to get better and better. And from Bahrain's performance, he's hoping that he continues to put Ericsson in his place and kind of show why he should be there.
Yeah,
that's straight exactly. Point.
But,
that'd be nice.
I think news we can move maybe a bit more close to the front of the grid. Red Bull. Now, I'm not up to scratch fully on why they want to pull out the sport, but basically, Helmut, can you remember when did they last threaten to leave? I can't remember when it was.
2014, wasn't it?
Like 2014.
Last night, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think 2014 when they weren't sure which ending they were going to go for 2015 before they sorted out that whole Tag Heuer branded deal to basically solve their issues of, okay, fine, we'll take a slow Renault engine, but we're not going to give Renault any credit at all. If it does well, we're going to give Tag Heuer the credit for being the engine supplier.
Yeah, and now Helmut Marko has spoke up again, saying that with the new 2020 engine rules, Red Bull might leave again, because I think what I'm just reading here...
I read up on it before. Basically, Marko wants the 2020 engines to be a lot cheaper and a lot simpler, more of a racing engine rather than hybrid, high-tech, cutting edge, like just an engine that's good for racing, decently priced,
basically,
decently priced. Yeah, pretty much what I feel like most people would say, apart from the teams in F1 itself. I think.
Well, the manufacturers that make the engines.
Yeah, I mean it's in terms of the statement. In terms getting away from the engine, getting away from the actual engine, the more interesting part is the actual statement. I think it's just a bit of faff from Red Bull. We've seen, just said we saw it before. I don't think they're going to leave. I think they like F1. It's quite, a good sponsor, for them.
I think I think honestly, at the end of the day, I think it's just Helmut Marko throwing his toys out the pram because they're not winning. Because I think he got a little bit too complacent with winning, and now other teams have stepped up. I feel like he's a little bit. I don't know. Cause I think he's maybe looking at his wallet and going, "Holy shit, they're expensive." But because it literally just says here, he says that the latest engines in 2021. There needs to be like an independent engine supplier which Red Bull can maybe go to stay competitive.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. Basically, I remember Tom saying this countless amount of times, having more engine suppliers, so then they've got the option to switch to become competitive again, and saying that they need to be less sophisticated, noisier, more of a simple race engine, and cost below 10 million, which.
They're all valid points.
Basically, every engine we have, obviously, there's a works team to it. Even Honda, Honda exclusive to McLaren, so it's sort of a works team in that way. So, having one of those kind of we just make engines. We don't make cars. We just make engines. That's it.
Yeah. So, I think that's just Red Bull going. Hold on, we want to win.
Well, here's the thing. Today. I can sort of cut a parallel. With MotoGP, it's not so much with the engines; it's more of just the whole bike and the chassis, especially. But last season, for example, we had you got the factory teams, which are Honda, Yamaha, and Ducati. You got the three big boys there. Suzuki also, Aprilia. You got the big names, and then it's got B-spec satellite independent teams, like smaller ones. So your Force Indias, all these sort of teams. And last season was the first time in ages, I think, there was an independent team that won a race in Holland, in Assen, for Honda as an independent team for the first time in over a decade. And then there was another one like 2 races later. And the racing this season has been really competitive. And I think like last time out, Bautista, who drives on like a satellite Ducati on an independent Ducati team, he got 4th place. He beat both of the factory ones.
Right.
Like the main ones.
It's
like
again,
in MotoGP, there's the ability of a smaller team on pace and on merit genuinely beating.
When was the last time?
Big owner, it's big brother, so there should be that in F1 just to make it interesting. So if Toro Rosso beat Red Bull, but because of the engine, for example, for what they had, I don't know, it's something to make it interesting.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is the last team to win? Oh no, because Lotus are Renault. I think honestly, the last time an independent as such in Formula One was McLaren back in 2012 at Brazil when they had a Mercedes engine. Because the only other the teams that have won after that is Lotus, which are obviously just Renault, Red Bull, which are basically just Renault in a sense. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of a weird one, that one.
I'll class them as independent just because they're an energy drinks company that sponsor a team.
But they are they are basically Renault. They had a stint where they were Renault. So
it's
quite
just
an
throw out
odd
a picture. We don't see a Jordan win a race anymore.
No, we don't see a Force India win a race. Put it that
That's
way.
what I'm saying. But it's not even that. They're not anywhere close winning a race. They're nowhere near.
Well, even more now because of the new rules.
Exactly. And what I'm talking about in MotoGP, there's actually a chance that an independent can actually win the race on merit. And that's why I think with the engine rules, what Marco's saying, there has to be a bit more level playing field, affordable.
I think just you want to go to every race and just be like, don't know what's going to happen.
Who's going to win?
Yeah.
Just don't know.
Or you'll be like, okay, so you'll have the usual ones who have been dicing up in the top 6, but definitely he looks good, like Hulkenberg, that's a bad example. Ocon looks good enough that he can dice it up maybe for a podium today because he's got the pace, whereas his teammate hasn't.
It's something that F1 has missed for a very long time, and you don't see back in, for example, 2009 Spa when Force India looked competitive and got pole position and got second place in the race. You don't see that all when Williams used to be at the pinnacle right at the front, so it's something that maybe, obviously, technically as an independent, Red Bull are kind of throwing their toys out the pram, and you would think, I think, like Force India, the teams like Force India and Williams would do, but they've never really been, they haven't been there at the top long enough.
Yeah.
I think Force India are a good example. They won't ever make a fuss about it because they've never been there anyway, whereas Red Bull have been there long enough to then go, hold on, how come we're not back in the front again?
I think it says a lot about the cost of F1 when Red Bull are now complaining about costs. When back in 2011, they were like the top team spending the most money out of every team, and people were complaining about them spending money. But now the money's scaled up so high that Red Bull can't keep up. And actually, when you look at how much money Mercedes spend and Ferrari spend, more so Mercedes, it's a different planet. And I think not even Red Bull. Red Bull I think they could keep up, but Helmut Marko sort of looking at it like the books don't balance. Like it doesn't make sense. We're like,
I think
there's like
back in 2010,
there's like a ceiling for a drinks company to be like, I can't spend this much on what
Red
is
Bull
basically
hold on.
basically a sponsor opportunity basically all season long.
Yeah.
So
I think the 2010 car for Red Bull was, because I remember Adrian Newey saying something like it was on a significantly lower budget to other teams such as McLaren and Ferrari who were right at the top. So obviously Red Bull went through that transition of slowly starting to spend more and more money each year, and then it has hit that ceiling. We've carried on going. The manufacturers have now taken over, and it kind of outlines the problem beyond the engine. But we'll see what develops from this story because
I mean, it's like, I think in F1 also, depending on the engine situation, you'll always have the big boys nearer to the front because of the budget they have, unless there's a genuine cost cap introduced. But it would reduce the gap a lot. It's like I said, I go back to the same example, just in the last race in Argentina MotoGP. You had the two main Ducatis, which are Dovizioso and Lorenzo. Dovizioso was like running for the race win. Lorenzo was down in 12th. And in between those two, there's 3 independent Ducatis in between them, racing. Further than one of the official ones. And it's just nice having that curveball. So basically, it'd be like Lewis Hamilton in first, Bottas down in 12th, and you'd have 2 Force Indias and another Mercedes-powered car on genuine merit of pace in between the two.
Yeah. No, I would never see that. We would never, ever see that. You know, but, I think, we'll see what happens for that story, because it's probably quite an interesting one to keep on top of. But I think on like the smaller bits of news, we did miss out on talking about a little bit of track news because of the podcast being so close together. We never got to speak about Malaysia, which has finally been axed. I can't decide on whether I'm sad or happy about Malaysia going.
Yeah, it's one of them tracks where I don't really love it or hate it.
There were some good races there.
Definitely. I think he'll go down, not a classic, but almost a classic. I think there's been a lot of good moments there.
Because it was on the grid. It's on the calendar from '99.
Yeah, from the very first race. From the very first race, which was, I remember obviously Michael Schumacher breaking his leg in '99 in the British Grand Prix, and that was his first race back, and he was leading, and he gave team orders to Irvine to go win on the race because he was final for the championship that year. So even from that classic, that Michael Schumacher with a broken leg was actually the fastest guy around that weekend. From that first race to the last, it's only the last year with Hamilton's engine blow up. There's always been a few moments. Obviously, 09. I remember the 01 race where everyone went off on the second lap because it started pouring down on dry tyres and everyone went off. Similar to Nürburgring 2007.
2009 as well.
Yeah, 2009. 2012. There's been
2010. That was decent. Remember 2010?
Multi 21.
Was it?
There's been a lot of good races there.
I think McLarens, Red Bulls, and Ferraris were all at the.
All got knocked out in Q1.
Both Red Bulls, like Button span out. I think, and then I think Webber qualified in Q3. I think everyone went out on wets, but Webber went out on inters, and it wasn't looking like he was going to get pole, and then he snatched it right at the end. So. Obviously, we're coming off the top of our head.
I remember Fisichella's last ever race win was at that track in 06. There's been loads. There's been so many moments there, and like I say, it's one of the tracks where it went for nearly 20 years, 18 years in total, and it's done a lot of good. It's had a lot of good classic moments, and I think it'll be one of them ones where if we do ever go back to it, we'll be like, okay, yeah, all right, not too bad.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Along with Malaysia, it was announced like months ago. Singapore. Next year's 2018 race will be the last one. Obviously, replacing
I haven't heard
Malaysia
much more
and Singapore,
about that, which is quite odd.
No, they just sort of like they coldly shut it off. And they're like, yeah, when our current contract runs out at the end of next season's race, that's the last one. We're done. So obviously, replacing those two, we've got the German Grand Prix, and obviously we've got the French Grand Prix coming back. So, Liberty Media or not, we're going back to more traditional locations.
Yeah,
and
interesting
race pedigree tracks.
Just like talking about costs and fans and everything, because this is something that just came off the top of my head when watching Bahrain, was the fact that, okay, you look at Malaysia, you think of like the fans and everything, and you got to say that, I'm going to go back to this whole 21 Super Bowls, because I think this is what we're trying to aim for. You look at Malaysia and you go, okay, the atmosphere isn't mental. It's not like on par with China. I think that's a good place to compare it to. It's not the fans aren't that wild, but it is still a really decent place to go. You look at Bahrain, and I think on Channel 4 they brought this up. You know, going into the third sector, that really fast at like end to the second sector going into the third. Yeah. There is not a grandstand in sight. There is, I think there's only grandstands in the first sector. And you look at Bahrain, and I was just thinking, where is the atmosphere for this circuit?
I think it's all generated.
The night races. The night races in the atmosphere.
Thing is,
MotoGP pulls in more fans at Malaysia, so they're still going to go strong.
It's just an F1 the contract. It's hard to compare the two. In terms of fans, I do generally believe MotoGP racks in more in a lot of races. They racked in 150k for the Spanish Grand Prix last year around Catalonia. I think Bahrain is it's very similar to Abu Dhabi. It's on its way of to becoming sort of like it's one of them races where the fans from Bahrain don't go to the race. It's those who fly out there on like a glamorous weekend out to go to the race. I do agree. I'd like to see more grandstands put in, try and get a bit more out of that. But I was telling you two about the weekend. Like you look at there was DJ performances on the pit straight and like massive concerts for the first time ever. And it's like progressing nicely. Definitely since it's been a night race, it's definitely
definitely
it's becoming a Super Bowl. But I think it's still a long way to go. But I think the track is becoming a classic.
Been set with Kota last year getting Taylor Swift in, so by reeling in more fans there, it's just an odd one because Bahrain's in the middle of nowhere, so that's a problem. It's in a slightly sketchy part of the
Abu Dhabi's a bit in the middle of nowhere as well.
Yeah, so I don't
I
know.
hope it
It's
sticks
just
around
something
for a
that
while.
came off the
It's
top
a
of my
great
head.
track.
Yeah.
It's been a great track since it became a night race and the V6.
I'd like to see it around more, but you just want to see more fans there. That's all. You look at the start of the season, like Australia was absolutely incredible with the amount of fans there. China again, absolutely incredible with the amount of fans. You still look at certain parts of the track and you go, there could be a few more fans there. But then I just looked at Bahrain and I was just like, there's literally no grandstands there at all.
Well, China to me, even though it's got a lot of fans, something's missing because to me it just looks like like a big. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's a big industrial wasteland to me. It just looks very
Isn't China sinking though? Isn't Shanghai actually sinking?
I don't know, but just because of because of the constant air pollution and everything, it just looks like grey and like constantly misty, and there's nothing in the background. It's just like a bit of flat land where there's a track built there. I don't know if it needs a bit of like
China,
a Bahrain jazz, a bit of hey sort of.
Yeah, it needs a kick up.
I don't think the track organisers can play God and like put some mountains in there and stuff.
It's like what Bahrain has. It's got a lot of those, the runoff areas which are like painted in like green and orange and like pink and blue, like something like that. I don't know, like makes anything that's asphalt runoff, just paint it like red and yellow, which are like the colours of China, so to give it something different.
Something.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one because, like like Cal was saying, like we want some more fans at Bahrain. I think it's the track itself is great though. It's producing great racing as of late. So it's that kind of like we hope there's some more fans going there for the sake of the organisers so they can keep up the money. But in terms of F1 wanting to be there, I feel like I would hope the F1 wants to be there because it has produced some great races. Because on the flip side, you've got like you mentioned, Melbourne's got packed grandstands, but the track itself, well, let's face it, comparing to the other races, wasn't great. So it's that kind of, it's a no way kind of in worry because for the organisers, they're making plenty of money because it's a packed race, it's the opener, it's great. Yeah. For Bahrain, it's sort of like, it would be such a shame, I feel, if it goes away due to the organisers can't afford it anymore because it has produced some fantastic racing. So
I think that's kind of good to link it to Turkey, actually. Do you know when that went off? Because you think back to Turkey and you think, there was some... I didn't really see the full lifespan of Turkey because obviously we came to spot a little bit late, but like, I'll always remember 2010 as one of them races which was just absolutely insane with the battle between the McLarens and obviously the incident between the Red Bulls. And you think, there's been some good racing there, but because there was barely any fans... Yeah. It got kicked off the calendar, and then you look at it, and it's the same with Germany. It's being kicked off the calendar for the wrong reasons. You want it to be kicked off the calendar because it's a bad race, not because there's no fans turning up.
Hockenheim and Nürburgring are like two fantastic circuits. Yeah, it's just for the wrong reason that the organisers just can't. They like back with Marco, they just can't balance the books of like we can't afford to enter as an event.
I'm looking at just a little quick look. A lot of the reason why they haven't got a lot of main grandstands, especially like the middle curvy sectors, because obviously they've got all like the GT layouts and everything through there. So there's a lot of tarmac splits and like other track variants that go off in that area. Like, you remember the 2010 layout? They could easily put a grandstand where the track used to go, but the thing is, they still use that part of the track and like GT races.
Yeah, so they can't set one up. The 6-hour races. But something that made me laugh the other day was someone went, why don't they go back to the 2010 layout for Bahrain? And literally everyone on Channel 4 just went, you fucking... What? Why on earth would they do that? Because I think it was one of the worst changes to the circuit I think I've ever seen.
It just lost every flow it had.
All flow went straight down the drain. Because, I mean, Formula 1 cars are so fun to drive when they're going 60 miles an hour.
It's like it went to a 2-minute lap in the daytime. Bahrain, never in the night time could salvage that.
Way too
long. No, it's fine. As fine as it is now, it just needs a few. If you can set up a few grandstands, but like, I just had a look now. All 4 of the main straights have grandstands. So the pit straight, the straight into turn 4, the straight into the final corner, and the big back straight. It's just the curves that don't have any. But I'm guessing because the way the undulation of the track, I'm guessing you probably see a lot of it anyway. So I think it's not too bad. It just needs a few more things, just like maybe a grandstand into turn 10, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Or a grandstand on the inside of the second sector split, where you get that whole fast.
Yeah, exactly. It just feels a little bit like
cut into those lit up rocks they have. Just put
not even a grandstand because it's a night race. Just make it like an artificial mountain, so everyone can like sit there and see the whole thing from the top.
Like what they do at Sepang, where they can sit on the. That's the perfect place to sit. That is when you sit. That's the thing. Because if I ever went to Malaysia, you'd want to sit on the banks, because then if it started raining, you could go sliding down it, as most of the fans did, which is something I'm definitely going to miss from Malaysia. The fact that the fans went wild when it sprinkled with rain.
Or at least the 12-year-olds among us would. I don't think
I would. Get your Mac on and just go sliding. That'd be really good. But is there anything else?
No, just good. I'm happy European tracks are coming back.
Probably before we shoot, Renault with their 2027 car.
As I said on Twitter, literally,
it's terrible.
It was as if it was designed by someone who was describing what they wanted over McDonald's Wi-Fi to someone on the other side of the world. So it was like the most shaky connection ever. It looks horrendous.
It looks futuristic, but if that's what the future looks then
Tron.
The future can fuck off.
It looks like Tron, but that's great and all, but that's not what F1 should look like.
Can I also just point out their livery? They just did the first half of the car black, the last half of the car yellow. That's probably where liveries are going to go, because they're getting worse and worse.
That's what the car's right now, but just the other way around. Front half's yellow, the back half's black, and their driver suits basically it's exactly the same as that.
Oh, their driver suits are horrendous.
This year. But I do want to say actually on Renault, shout out, good performance. I think Renault Force India Toro Rosso are the 3-minute tour teams that can do bits this season. Renault will progress very nicely this season, I feel. And
what's odd is the fact that Renault and Force India are like polar opposites. It's like
Renault qualify well. Force
Renault
India
qualify,
race better.
yeah. So there's like they're both the opposite of each other. So Renault because a lot of people have been saying that why are Renault getting so much praise because they've only had 1 points finish, I think.
Yeah, it's a very mixed one. Like people are Renault overachieving or underachieving, and it's like where do you fall on that side of the fence? Because
I think they're underachieving in the race. I think they just got to try and convert that qualifying pace to race pace over 60 odd whatever laps. And I think people are probably quick to forget what they do on Saturday because obviously Sunday's the more important part. But, Saturday, if you look at it, like Tom said at China, if you just compare it back to the beginning of last season, it's just the madness that they're in Q3.
For me,
really.
I wouldn't even say it's over or under. I think they're slap bang on target because the fact is they're 1 in 5th in the constructors and they're not too far off being the 5th best team, to be honest with you, because Williams are the 4th best team and now after that they could easily be the next best team. So and that's what you got to compare it to. So if they're finishing ahead of Williams anytime soon, then they're overachieving, and if they're finishing anything else under than 5th place, then they're underachieving. So
I'm just looking into this article actually about this 2027 car, and they've paired it with just general F1 changes, saying that there needs to be 2 main events, and a long race and a short final sprint and all this stuff. Can we please get out our head that, because I like the idea that Formula 1 is all about building up to that final race, that pinnacle event, or the rest of it's just a build up. The Sunday is where the race is. I feel like having 2 races is just taking away the point of the Grand Prix, the main event.
Yeah, I think there's two ways you cut it: via TV, via in person. We're going to Silverstone this year IRL. I'm perfectly fine with the current format because we're going to get 2 sessions on a Friday, 2 on a Saturday, and then the main event on the Sunday. So when you're going as a person, you're getting good bang for your buck. So you're going to see the cars plenty of times.
GP3, Porsche.
Yeah, and it's like, in all these things where they say like, oh, let's just condense it into only Saturday and Sunday. Well, it's like, if you're a person that regularly goes to the races, or goes to every year to the British Grand Prix, you're like, well, no, because I quite enjoy the Friday, because, you get to ease into it, get to see the cars,
chill out. It's just like a nice day out.
I think that's what I'm saying. On TV, I agree on TV, it's a bit meh, but when you're there in person, I think if you paid your money for it, and you're watching it, I think the current format's absolutely fine.
It's just
the
price.
I would change,
I think the price just the change.
Yeah, the price. I think that will come down. That's why, fingers crossed, with the engines change.
I think that's why there's a lot of suggestions for that kind of 2 race, kind of shorter ones, because they want to justify the price they're doing instead of just going, let's just try and lower the price. Basically,
well, here's my thing. The same way they're trying to cut engine costs right now by reducing the amount of power units at your disposal to 4 per season.
Yeah. That's
not the right way of doing it. It's like, how can I put it? They had 8 engines 4 years ago in a season. I understand, looking at now today's numbers, that's way too much. But what I'm saying is, I don't think taking engines away is the right way of cutting costs. It's not the right way. It's like,
I think a cost cap on R&D would be much better. Like we said it before.
It's like, how can I put it? If you're making a cake, you still want the cake. You don't want a cake that gets reduced in 50% of its size, because you're not going to get the same satisfaction out of it. You still, if it means you've got to invest in cheaper ingredients.
That is actually legit.
This is a weird analogy.
That's actually a great analogy, because that's what happens. Like nowadays, that's what companies do. They actually they're quite clever about it. They'll charge the same price. They'll just give you a smaller chocolate bar or something, and they've cut costs.
I don't know.
It's like that. It's like they're cutting costs by cutting the engine instead of what. Like all the
I don't
outside
know. Let me put it to you: Would you rather have a 2-liter bottle of Coke, or of a fake Coke, or like a Tesco Coke, or a 1-liter bottle of just ordinary Coke?
Yeah.
I think I'll probably go for the 2-liter, and it'll be cheaper as well, and it's the same size, and it's the bigger size. So I think with F1 events, I don't think stripping away from what we currently have is a good option, and obviously by reducing the amount of power units we have, reducing the running that the cars provide, is only making that worse.
It's
and
not
more
the
likely.
cars. It's not. You don't have to. What I think I've just come from my head is you don't have to limit the teams. You don't have to limit the cars themselves. You've got to limit everyone. So instead of reducing running costs by just saying, oh yeah, you just don't have many engines. Just limit the amount of running on track. So then maybe shorten it, which is obviously then going into changing the race weekend. So there's pros and cons about it, because you just go, oh yeah, to limit running, just have one practice session.
Well, Bernie Eccleston said a lot of things in his time, but he said one thing that makes brilliant sense. F1's all like cutting costs and reducing its fuel emission and whatnot. It's very simple. Why not just take less lorries and less motorhome size, which isn't as necessary as the actual cars itself to the track? Why take loads of lorries with lots of long haul cargo and spend so much money on trucks that are definitely not designed to be fuel efficient, like F1 cars?
Yeah.
And there's loads of other things, like obviously you can cut down in other areas, which to the naked
salaries.
eye, the viewer. No, but just to the viewer, I don't care if they bring 2 trucks compared to 4 for a race weekend, if it means they still get there and everything's exactly the same. But it means it costs behind the scenes. So,
but what I've just read,
without going to a tangent, because otherwise we're losing ourselves. Go on.
I've just spotted something, and that there will be fan boost available to help drivers in the closing stages. Fuck off. I'm closing that tab.
That was the worst idea that Formula E still have.
Fan boost. Could you imagine? Just Max Verstappen would just have permanent fan boost.
I was going to say something. I've lost. I had a really good thought to bring up, but I've completely lost it. You have to continue on. But no, I'm not, because I had a really good thing I want to talk about.
I think for when we're talking about cost cutting in general, getting away from the engine just as a general cost cut, I think things like just reducing, you just cap put a cap so the big teams spend that much, not because they have to sometimes. I think they just spend sometimes quite a lot because they can and they want to chuck everything they could at it. But if you put a cap in where it's basically the cap is at a level where the top teams will still do better because the experience they've hired from their staff, they have better facilities already in place, and is then more just a case of they can efficiently use what they've got better compared to small teams where they're inefficient, but they can still keep up in terms of the actual cost they're spending, so they can just stay in the sport for longer. I think that's a way to do it. Reward efficiency rather than rewarding wallet size.
Yeah, definitely. 100% agree with that.
Which kind of makes sense with the whole freaking V6 engine. efficient fuel, blah, blah, blah. Like, why don't they do the same for the cost?
Give it time, but Liberty Media definitely going in the right direction with everything.
Yeah, I think Ross Brawn has that down.
Well.
Ross Brawn made me laugh. He said he didn't want to work with Bernie Eccleston. He just said straight up, I didn't want to work with him.
Nope.
Yeah.
Which is probably why we're in this mess in the first place, because if Bernie Eccleston went a little bit earlier, then Ross Brawn might have come in a little bit earlier as well, meaning we might not be in this mess. Not mess.
I don't know if he would have come in earlier because he was still Mercedes team principal in 2013, or even a bit closer.
14, 15, maybe last year.
And I think he needed his time off. He needed his
he wanted to do some fishing.
Cake. Yeah.
Fishing.
But it's like we're only 6 months in, and the changes have already been decent.
Great.
Practice session, qualifying session, race highlights, post-race press conferences, analysis, everything on the YouTube channel.
The
absolutely
highlights
covered.
are going up that quickly that people are putting in the comments of also this podcast as well. Apparently, you've been annoying people by putting who wins in the title. But apparently, the actual official Formula One YouTube account have been annoying fans as well because they've been putting it up that early that it's spoiling the result.
To be honest, I think it affects probably 2% of the people who actually watch. So, in my opinion, it doesn't matter too much. I think a lot of people who comment that are probably people who aren't even subscribed to this channel. I think they're probably just searching on YouTube for it. Because I think most people, especially the ones that come from Twitter, they're already there watching the race. So, I mean, I get it, but there's a reason why you try and put an interesting title for a race podcast because you want to try and get people to click. It doesn't matter how good the content or the podcast is. If people aren't clicking, it doesn't actually matter if they're not clicking in the first place to then see what it's all about. So it's just simple. We're trying to get the podcast as much exposure as possible. It's quite tough. It's actually going to be tougher this season now because F1 is doing such a great job of getting those highlights out. That less people want to just watch a discussion video, they can just watch the actual race highlights. So, just trying our best to get the podcast out there. Trying to grow it as best we can. We're trying to put, we said we're putting SoundCloud on this year. Hopefully in the next year, fingers crossed, we can look at putting it on stuff like iTunes. Then I know people wanted that as well. So we're slowly trying to build it up. And to be honest, I think that's like an age-old YouTube argument that I think is a kind of old news. People have said that for 3 years now. So
as a ending topic, Sochi predictions discussion.
Well, there has been a rumor that Ferrari might struggle at Russia because of the cold conditions, but I'm not too sure.
Well, first things first, there'll be a -1 stop strategy.
Yep.
Take into account the tire around there. They'll
stopping in qualifying.
Yeah, that should be coming to the pits, and they'll be like, actually give me the set that are already 50% worn. I don't need the fresh ones. Alright.
Yeah, I don't need fresh.
I think I'm going to go into expecting a really poor race, and then I want to be
jinxed.
Impressed.
I want to say I want to jinx it.
2015.
I want to say I want to jinx it. So it's going to be a terrible race. Terrible.
I think it's going to be a very sort of 2x2 order for Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari. I want to after the last result, I want to say Ferrari are going to win it, but I'm still not convinced yet. So I'm going to say
been a good track for Mercedes as well. So
I'm going to say.
If you're not going to say, I'll say it.
Bottas pole, Bottas win.
That's a bit weird.
He had a few issues in Bahrain, which we found out a bit after.
I'm going to go Hamilton pole, Hamilton win.
Yeah, I'm going to go same Hamilton pole, Hamilton win, and then stick Vettel and Bottas on the podium. Oh no,
Vettel second, Bottas
Ricciardo.
third.
I'm going to get Ricciardo on the podium. I'm going to go wild because
Vettel second, Bottas third.
I feel like then I just realised how many straights there are at Red Bull.
Red Bull, yeah.
Sochi.
There's a lot of.
I'm going to go Bottas, Hamilton, Vettel.
Right.
Okay.
Hopefully it's a banger, but
there you go.
Yeah, Russia hasn't had the best of reputations, so let's hope that it kind of steps up. I think if there's any year for Sochi to step up, it's this year. Otherwise, I have a feeling it's going to be saying bye-bye.
I really don't think it will, but I hope I'm proved wrong. But
yeah,
I think
here's the thing. With Sochi, would you consider it a similar sort of track to Bahrain?
No.
Fast speed corners, high speed corners. Not in terms
it's very flat.
Whether you like it or not. I'm talking.
No, I think it's very flat. I think it's too flat to be in the same category. Even if the corners are fast, the corners may get faster. There'll be hopefully more flow, but I think it's just such a linear track that I don't even think these regulations could
undulation
make a
changes bring character to a race circuit.
I hope I'm completely proved wrong. I really do. I really hope I am.
The reason I'm just bringing it up is because I think we all noticed at Bahrain how much easier it was for cars to follow each other around that track closely.
Yeah, somewhat, yeah.
With these cars, I'd like to think, because of the higher speed nature of the corners, I think that track's very much designed for a 2017 car. I think that would be a track where they might gain a lot of time.
Maybe. I think time will tell.
I'd like to see some close proximity action like in Bahrain, because obviously Bahrain didn't really see any, there wasn't any drastic improvement on pace, whereas this one I think there could be. So maybe.
Yeah, we'll see.
We shall see. But let us know what you guys think, your predictions. If you got it to this far, because typically, I think only according to analytics, about 10% of you make it all the way right to the end. So if you have got this far, let us know what your predictions are. And maybe also just put Maldonado's going to win the race, just so we know who's actually watched all the way to the end. But if you did enjoy it, leave a like. Let us know what you thought in the comments below, as per usual, on anything we talked about. Any of the things, McLaren, Red Bull, leaving, engines, cost cut, a lot of things we talked about. Yeah, and we'll see you guys then for the next podcast. If you're new around here, do subscribe to this channel for the podcast. Check out these two, description below, and also our Twitters are always above our names. And as usual, you would have seen on screen as well throughout. We're also on SoundCloud. If you do want to kind of download it, you can do off SoundCloud and have it on the go. But that's been the podcast for this week. Hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you guys next time.